Welcome to another episode of The Wealthy Boss Show. We are talking yoga in today's episode, and I have to admit, I feel like this episode is just a bit overdue. After all, I'm a yoga instructor, and I really don't talk about yoga all that much. Well, that's going to change, not only today with today's podcast episode, but I'm also brainstorming and I'd love to get your feedback as well on what you would like to see in a possible future yoga program as one of the Wealthy Boss programs. I love yoga. I have personally been practicing it for 10 or 11 years now, and I've been teaching it for about 8 years. So I love sharing my love of the practice with others. So if yoga is something that you have maybe considered doing in the past, you may have tried it once or twice, you keep hearing all these amazing things about it, but maybe you just didn't feel like you quite connected with it, or you just haven't made the darn thing a habit. I'm going to give you 5 reasons today why I think you should. So if you haven't been convinced until now, this is going to do it. So reason number 1, it calms you down. How many entrepreneurs don't need help with this? I know I sure do. My mind is constantly spinning. And I think as entrepreneurs, we particularly struggle with always being forward focused, always living in that futuristic sense of time. We always want the next thing. We're always strategizing. We're always stressing out about how to make our businesses better. Which I get, that's part and parcel of some of the drive that it requires. Only the people, I realize I'm categorizing a little bit here, but I think it's safe to say in general that it's the people who are willing to kind of live with those traits and always be seeking for that next best thing and strive forward. I think those are the ones that end up becoming entrepreneurs because we want more out of life. But living in a constant state of panic or overdrive, first of all, it just sucks. Like, that's no way to live a life. It's not a good way to be happy. It's not a recipe for personal satisfaction and peace and fulfillment. And it actually makes us less effective in our ambitions anyway. When we are cray cray, you think that's actually going to help our businesses? No. So yoga is famous for helping people calm the heck down, be more present, focused, be more mindful, and just generally feel more at peace, which who would turn that down? I love the t-shirt. There's a t-shirt that I want to buy that says, and you can see it as a meme floating around on Instagram. It says, I do yoga because punching people in the face is generally frowned upon. And I love that. And I so relate with that. So you don't have to start as being this perfectly placid, calm, chill, Zen person to benefit from yoga. In fact, I would argue that the people who describe themselves as the opposite of being Zen and chill would be the ones that benefit most from it. And this isn't just like the placebo effect. It's not just, lighting candles and incense, which is totally optional, by the way. There are defined scientific mechanisms at play that cause this sense of serenity. So first of all, yoga is shown to counteract the levels of inflammation in the body that stress can really send into overdrive. So having unhealthy levels of inflammation, which is extremely common in today's fast-paced society, can exacerbate a lot of different things in the body, both physical and mental. And so yoga really helps to ameliorate those levels of inflammation that are brought on by stress. According to Jonathan Greenberg, who's a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Psychiatry at Mass General Hospital and Harvard Medical School, according to him, yoga is thought to balance out the HPA axis in our heads, which stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. There will not be a quiz on that, but just in case you were wondering what that stands for, that's what it stands for. You might be sad you asked. Now, what does the HPA axis do? well, it's really considered to be the master control center of the brain that is responsible for keeping both your sympathetic nervous system, otherwise known as our fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which can be referred to as the rest and digest mode of being. It helps balance these out so that they're at functioning at appropriate levels. We need both in our body. The sympathetic nervous system is the mechanism, the instinct essentially in our brains that motivates us to get the heck out of there if an anvil is falling out of the sky and about to crush us on our head. We need that little bit of get up and go to put us out of harm's way. The trouble is many of us are living in this constant state of always activating the SNS, the sympathetic nervous system. And when that happens, that means that other processes that are regulated by the parasympathetic nervous system are not getting to take place on a regular basis. Things like digestion, things like, healing, things that are just important for our normal regulation of our body. But when we're constantly activated in that sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system never really gets to do its healing work. And that's when we feel super frazzled, and a lot of things can go wrong in our bodies as well. Well, practicing yoga has also had a measurable effect on reducing the reactivity of a certain portion of your brain called the amygdala. Now, we've talked about the amygdala before. The amygdala is the more primitive, sometimes it's referred to as like the reptilian part of our brains that is responsible for your emotion-centric reactions. So this is what happens when you're going on 0 hours of sleep and you snap at your husband or wife because they did something that wasn't really that big a deal, but because your amygdala is kicking in high gear, you made choices you regret. So we become highly reactionary when the amygdala is in overdrive, which also happens when we are super stressed, when we're sleep deprived, number of reasons. But yoga is shown to actually reduce the level of reactivity with the amygdala. So basically this means that the more we practice yoga, the less reactive we're going to be, the less we're going to snap at people, the less we're going to make like snap judgments, and can think a little bit more strategically and rationally, which happens in different regions of the brain other than the amygdala. If you are still not convinced that yoga is going to help you, well, chew on this. Yoga has actually been used extensively as an effective therapy for both prison inmates as well as veterans suffering from PTSD. Okay, if it can help inmates, if it can help like war savage soldiers, I think it can help you probably in your day-to-day life, don't you? So that is reason number one, and that is plenty reason enough that it calms you down. But I have 4 more to seal the deal. So let's move on to number 2. This one might appeal to your sense of vanity. Yoga is actually anti-aging, and not just because it keeps you flexible and able to reach down and touch your toes and pick that thing up off the ground that you dropped, although that's super cool and helpful. It actually goes a lot deeper than that, and I think you'll be excited to hear this. So yoga actually has a proven effect on decelerating the anti-aging process overall, not just, physically or mechanically. Everything from slowing down when you turn gray, when you get wrinkles, all the way to how fast and how severely cognitive decline sets in. And it does this by having a measurable impact on the length of our telomeres. What are telomeres, you might ask? Telomeres are the end caps of our DNA, and they're really starting to get a lot of exposure in the scientific community now because they have so much influence on our genetic expression. So these end caps of our DNA really set the cadence for how quickly our cells are going to die. So the shorter the end caps are, so the shorter our telomeres are on our cells, the more rapidly that cell is going to die. So think of it, I've heard experts refer to telomeres as like the little end caps on a shoelace that keep them from fraying. So that can be a great visual to think of, the longer and more like sturdy that your telomeres are, the longer you have before the shoelaces of your cells start to fray and get worn out, which leads to the things we mentioned, like dementia and physical signs of aging and looking old and haggard and your skin losing its elasticity. According to the Journal of Clinical and Diagnostic Research, the meditative aspects of yoga practice compound to lengthen our telomeres. And they've been widely demonstrated throughout MRI scans to also improve gray matter in the brain. So not just your DNA end caps, but also affecting the brain directly, increasing more gray matter, more brain cells, especially in areas like the hippocampus, which are linked to memory ability. So incredibly important as we age, not just for physical vanity and appearance, but for staying sharp, for staying focused, for staying able to engage in conversations, able to continue our work and be meaningfully involved with our families and our community. Practicing yoga is actually going to help extend basically your shelf life of how much functional life you have. So there's a difference between a lifespan and a health span. Practicing yoga is going to extend that health span where you're really able to enjoy your life for longer. Reason number 3 that yoga is a practice worth considering to take up. It leads to better nutrition. So these things work so hand in hand, and there are a lot of bad habits that lead to destructive, unvirtuous cycles. Well, yoga is one of those things that leads to more virtuous, positive, constructive cycles. So according to studies like those done by the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, yoga is scientifically proven to enhance the level of mindfulness with which we eat. That in turn leads to better portion control, choosing more appropriate foods for our body, healthier levels of body fat, losing weight if we have too much weight on our frame, as well as so many other important cascade of benefits that happen when we are eating the right amounts and the right types of food. So because practicing yoga incorporates a lot of mindfulness, we're really creating this long-term ripple effect of doing so many good things for our body by eating the proper food. Now, we know when we're eating food that's good for us, and especially in a way that is not out of being super paranoid or regimented or overly concerned about needing to look, the exact certain way that society thinks that we do. When we eat from that place of self-love and nourishment and acceptance, we are doing so many good things for our body. When we have that quality nutrition with the quality motivation, we are setting our bodies up for better digestion, reduced bloating, less inflammation. Again, so we already know that practicing yoga in and of itself can reduce inflammation, but it leads to these other beautiful interconnected chains of habits that can also help more comprehensively decrease inflammation. Eating the right foods can lead to better mood, sharper focus, more energy levels. So if you're eating the right foods throughout the day, then you're going to have we're going to try to avoid that mid-afternoon slump. You're going to have more alertness for the rest of your projects that you have to get done, and even greater psychological health. Super important. And how great is it to be able to have this positive, virtuous cycle rather than a vicious cycle? And it all starts from just a little bit of yoga. Reason number 4 why yoga is a practice worth taking up. If I haven't convinced you yet, this is my favorite one. And I almost feel like I should do a whole episode just on this one because it's super important and people may often discount yoga if they don't understand this point. So hear me out. If you've avoided yoga in the past because you think it's all just a bunch of boring stretching and breathing, let me tell you, you have been in the wrong yoga class. And by the wrong yoga class, I actually mean the wrong yoga class for you because it could be totally positive and beneficial for someone else. So, reason number 4 is that yoga can be whatever you need it to be. There are gobs of styles of yoga out there. I believe gobs is the actual technical, official, scientific calculation of them, the unit by which they are measured. There are so many forms of yoga, both in terms of longstanding traditional styles of yoga versus all this stuff that people make up these days of blended hybrids and fusions. And that's totally fine. But what I want you to take away from that is that if you think yoga is just really gentle and isn't a good workout, isn't something that you have time for, or is something that's boring, then you probably need to seek out a style that is more appropriate for what you need and what you like, because I promise you it's out there. If you like to work, if you like a really hard workout that spikes your endorphins and leaves you sweating, there are absolutely styles of yoga that accomplish this. In fact, fun little fact, my husband and I actually met in yoga. He was teaching, and then later I actually became certified. And he had opened up a yoga studio for a short while before going back to healthcare and then becoming a pilot. So he has a lot of interests. So anyway, we met during yoga, and as he had this pretty aggressive, maybe that's not the right word to say. Maybe you're not supposed to use the word aggressive with yoga, but it really was. It was a very kind of sports focused style of yoga because it was such an intense workout. He actually had a pro NFL player come in and take the workout and say it was the hardest workout he'd ever been through. An NFL football player. So I guarantee you, if you've only been to yoga classes that you sit and chant and breathe, there's a form for you that can be super beneficial and not boring and be super challenging. So yoga can be appropriate for everyone. It can be appropriate for kids all the way through seniors, and it can be practiced, via anything from sitting in a chair, breathing, all the way up to incorporating weights and crazy body weight resistance exercises where you're sweating and burning major calories and sculpting your muscles and building crazy amounts of strength. It really all depends on that modality of yoga that you choose to practice and the teaching style of the instructor and or studio if you're practicing outside your home. So, like I said, there are gobs of styles and traditions of yoga, but I'm just going to give a super high level primer of some of the major differences amongst some of the major styles of yoga so that you can kind of dial in to the ones that would be most appropriate for you, whether you're looking for a studio or whether you're looking for yoga videos, which I'm going to give you some resources of yoga videos I've created at the end as well. So first of all, we have vinyasa or power yoga. Now, if you think that yoga is boring, this is probably the style that you need to search out, because I think if you had tried one of these classes before in the past, you probably wouldn't think it's boring. So power yoga and vinyasa yoga, they may have some subtle differences, but they're both going to be characterized as pretty vigorous physical practices. They require muscle strength, they develop muscle strength, and they also tend to move through a flowing sequence of poses as opposed to just holding like one pose for a long time and then maybe moving on to the next. Next up, we can look at either yin or restorative yoga. Now, these are two very different modalities within themselves. They serve different purposes. Yin focuses more on flexibility, whereas restorative focuses more on deep relaxation and muscular release. However, both of these, yin or restorative, both of these lean more towards a very gentle, very slow, very calm practice where you're holding one pose for anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes, but these are gentle poses that don't typically require any muscular strength. It's more holding a pose that's either stretching or just simply deeply relaxing. Now, hatha yoga, sometimes called hatha yoga. There's a lot of debate about whether or not like that's actually a quote unquote style or just a catch-all for any type of physical practice, because within the tradition of yoga, we have physical practices of yoga, but we also have breathwork practices, we have mental practices, we have spiritual practices. So it can be a catch-all term, but typically if you see a class or a yoga video described as a hatha yoga, HATHA, workout or class, then this typically means that it's going to be a fairly beginner, fairly gentle, but you're still going to incorporate some movement and some muscular holds within these poses. It's going to be less flowy than vinyasa power yoga, less intense, but a little bit more movement perhaps than a little bit more muscular requirements than something like a yin or a restorative yoga. Bikram yoga and hot yoga. There are definitely people that fall on either side of the camp of loving these. Myself, I don't love them. I feel like it's just a cheaper, less effective version. And by cheaper, I don't even mean financially cheaper. I just mean style wise. I think it's kind of the ugly stepson of what a vinyasa class should be. But people love it. Some people love it. So Bikram yoga, the true traditional form of hot yoga, which then led to offshoots of it, Bikram yoga is actually characterized by the same set of poses. So you're going to move through the same sequences every single time, which to me sounds totally boring. Where's the challenge in that? But again, sorry if you love Bikram yoga, you might, that's fine. But it also takes place in temperatures upwards of 105 degrees. I already live in Arizona. I already experience 105 temperatures plus more often than I'd like. I don't need to experience that in the yoga room. The reasons that hot yoga and Bikram yoga turn the heat up so much is supposedly to detoxify through sweating. However, I just find, although there is benefit to sweating and releasing toxins through sweat in something like, say, a sauna, I don't like to combine that with a physical practice because you're actually just prematurely fatiguing your body. And by doing that, you're actually exerting less muscular effort throughout the workout. You're just feeling tired sooner. So you're not actually able to do as much. I also find that because you're sweating so much, real talk, your mat gets slippery and you actually need to have a little bit of that grip to go more deeply into some of the more challenging poses. So I find myself the times that I have taken hot yoga being a little bit more ginger and actually not fully expanding into the poses because I was worried I was going to slip and fall on my face. So again, if you love Bikram yoga, hey, the workout that you love is the one that you should do. But personally, I think if you want a good physical workout, I would recommend just a nice vinyasa flow or power yoga workout for you. And then we have things like Kundalini and Ashtanga yoga, which again have differences from one another, but they're going to be much more steeped in tradition, much more steeped in methodology. They're both going to share in common a very devoted practice to more spiritual and mental components besides just the physical practice. So they're going to be perhaps maybe a little bit less accessible for someone who's really mainstream and contemporary and maybe a little bit unsure or feels a little odd about getting into some of the spiritual components of yoga. But some people also come to yoga because of that, which is great too. So I hope you get started in the right direction for choosing a yoga class or a yoga video that is worth your time and serves what you need. All right, last but not least, especially for those of you listening who are entrepreneurs, which is probably most of you, since I work specifically with entrepreneurs, reason number 5 that yoga is a practice worth taking up is that it makes you better at business. It does. It makes you better at business. A study from the University of Illinois proves that practicing yoga leads to improved accuracy and quicker response times in cognitive tests, even more so than other forms of exercise like running or other aerobic exercise. Yoga, let me say that again, yoga is more beneficial even than other forms of exercise like aerobics for improving cognitive ability, and that has been shown through research. It makes you better at problem solving. I know for myself, I have solved many a problem within my business while on the yoga mat. And it just helps you be more creative. It helps you be more aware of your surroundings. I think even physically changing environment, so you're not just looking at the room around you in the same point from the same point of view as you normally do. You're literally moving your body and looking at things from different angles, and that translates over to being able to think more strategically, to problem solve more creatively. And it also, speaking of creativity, increases your alpha brainwaves, which are important for improved creativity. So whether you are a creative entrepreneur and your content itself is creative, or whether you need to think creatively to build out your long-term plan and your strategy, or fix a problem within your business or your workflow, and creativity is important for us all. So to recap, the 5 reasons that yoga is a practice worth taking up. Number 1, it calms you down, and who couldn't use more of that? Number 2, it's anti-aging from physical, totally vanity-driven aspects all the way to super important and serious concerns like being able to remember things and it be sharp and on our game late into life. It covers all those things from a regular practice. It leads to better nutrition. There is something unique about yoga that enhances the mindfulness with which we eat, meaning that we're going to eat what's appropriate for us and the amounts that are appropriate for us, and even in a way that is super positive and comes from a very healthy psychological standpoint. Number 4, it can be whatever you need it to be. If you need it to be cross training for another workout you love, if you need it to build your muscles, if you need it to burn calories, if you need it to heal from an injury, if you need it just to chill the heck out, it can be all of those things. And you can adapt and modify the style and the modality that you practiced based on whatever it is that you're needing. And the 5th reason, of course, tying it back in with the mission of Wealthy Boss, is it makes you better in your business by improving creativity, by sharpening cognitive function, and by making sure that you are thinking strategically rather than emotionally so that you can choose the best long-term plan for your business. Well, I certainly hope I have inspired you to give yoga a try. If you're wondering what the next steps might be for you to practice that, I have an easy solution for you. I have a yoga workout that I would love for you to try, particularly if that point about yoga maybe feeling boring to you in the past kind of resonates with you. I have one that I think you won't find boring. I think you'll find quite challenging. It's my free yoga plus cardio workout circuit. So it's a circuit video, meaning you're going to intersperse little bursts of cardio with yoga moves. And this is going to serve as strength training. This is going to serve as cardio. It's going to give you some flexibility. It's going to help you chill out. And you're going to do all this within a 25-minute time span from home with zero equipment, maybe just a yoga mat. So I'd love to invite you to download that video at wealthyboss.com. Again, wealthy is spelled WELLTHY, wealthyboss.com/circuit. I can't wait to hear what you think of that video. And let me know as well, whether it's in the comments or if you want to catch me on Instagram at Wealthy Boss Show, if you would like more yoga videos and if you would be interested in maybe taking part in one of our first programs of, cut that part out. And then let me know too, whether that's in the comments, if you're watching this on a social media platform, or if you're listening to the podcast version, go over and look me up at Wealthy Boss Show on Instagram and let me know what kind of yoga videos you'd like to see more of. And if you would like me to create a yoga program sooner rather than later for the Wealthy Boss community. That's all I got for now. I can't wait to see you next time. Thanks so much for listening.